Hey guys, I have a little philosophy lesson for you, and it's pretty interesting. To start off, it came from when I was pulling dandelions out of our garden, my family's garden, and currently we have garlic planted in our garden because it's like planted the year prior. And I want to talk about how this like relates to heaven in a lot of ways, and if you read the Nag Hammadi scriptures, you'll find out where a lot of my philosophy is coming from. So, when you look at the visible and invisible world, the invisible is like that of a head of garlic, and that it is hidden underneath the surface. You know it's there, but you can't see it, which is like God, and it's like heaven. You know that life is underneath the surface, but you cannot see it. And it's actually the beginning of life, the root of life, in the sense that we come from God and we return to God, okay, when we die. And when you eat garlic, you first have to take the life out of it by uprooting it. So you uproot it and you take off the top, which is like the visible realm, which is like the body. So we remove our body, we take our soul, and then our soul is consumed, which is like garlic. You remove the body, and then God takes in the soul into heaven. And the reason this relates to dandelions is because dandelions can also be eaten, but they are the reverse. You take off the root, but you eat the leaves. So it's the opposite of how you consume the garlic. So you consume the visible, but you remove the invisible. And this really can apply to any plant, but I think it's significant that it is a dandelion because it's like a weed. Okay? And now an unwise man will take the dandelions and associate them with the other weeds, and he will not consume them. But a wise man will take the dandelions and preserve them as food, because you do need to waste food when people are hungry. It is better that you eat the dandelions and preserve the money to give to the poor than to waste the dandelions and then waste the money on more food. You would be ignorant to do so. So the way I see it is this, is that as the garlic represents the soul, and the bulb of garlic represents the soul, and the top represents the body, we remove the visible in order to always have the invisible, which is the garlic hidden underneath. But also, once the invisible is uprooted, it becomes visible. And then when it becomes visible, it then can be removed in order to consume the visible. It's confusing, but it makes sense. Basically, the dandelion is the reverse of the garlic. But they both can be consumed. And now, what I'm getting at is basically an idea of forgiveness. Because the garlic has always been righteous, in the sense that it will always be consumed. The soul of the righteous will be taken into heaven, and their bodies will be disposed and they will remain on earth. And the invisible will become visible and then invisible again. Okay? Because when we die, our soul becomes visible to the invisible realm. Where it remains invisible, our body remains invisible to the invisible realm, but it becomes visible to the invisible once our soul, the invisible becomes visible. Lots of visibles. But, the reason this goes with dandelion and forgiveness is that we have to be able to, because there are some people who are sowed, that are kind of sowed with righteousness. They are born righteous. They have always been faithful to God. They have always been faithful to Christ. And they have always been faithful to the laws of mankind. But there are some who are like the dandelions. They were associated with the weeds. They're associated with those that will be at the left hand of God. They weren't born righteous. So they have to be turned and viewed as righteous. So we must accept them, and although they are unrighteous, they must become righteous through us, through the righteous. For when a man went to tend to the garlic, he also noted he needed to tend to some of the weeds, although some weeds are poisonous and inconsumable at all, because they would create infliction upon the consumer. So God cannot consume those that are poisonous, because he would do infliction upon himself and those took it into heaven. And those are the weeds that are burned or disposed of or go to hell. So there's really three categories of people. There are people who are born righteous, there are sinners who will become righteous, and then there are sinners who will never become righteous. And they are the not righteous. But how does this work to the dandelions? Well, once they are uprooted, what is invisible becomes visible. So the soul becomes visible to the invisible. But we consume that was originally visible. And then it becomes invisible in us. But then it becomes visible again through our body. So when I uproot what is invisible, the root, when I take life from the dandelion plant, I eat the leaves, which are visible. And then the body of that person, per se, becomes invisible. So it's the sense of this. Like, although our garments are removed in this life, our flesh and our blood are disposed of, the visible will perish, but the invisible, the soul, will live on through the invisible, the imperishable, because God is imperishable. So our souls are imperishable because they are then consumed by God, the imperishable. And then they become visible again because what is invisible to us is visible to the invisible. So your body will be restored, but it will be an imperishable matter. Because now you consume perishable matter, but in the next life you will consume imperishable matter. I cannot say right now what that imperishable matter is, but what I can say is this, is that that is the idea, that is the essence of everlasting life. And to those who do not see the invisible, or you cannot see the invisible, but you can envision it. Okay? Those who cannot envision the invisible will never obtain it. Those who cannot see heaven will never obtain heaven. Because you must be able to envision the invisible in order to make it visible. You understand? I know that's extremely confusing, and does it make sense? Yes and no. But this is what it is that the visible and the invisible, or the root and the leaves, are two in the same. Heaven and earth is two in the same. They are different, but they are two in the same. They are inner and the outer. Once you can imagine two in one, or two in the same, and one and two, then you will be able to see. It's interesting. So garlic and dandelions, a parable. Peace.